They say fate works in mysterious ways. That sometimes it whispers, other times it roars. And then there are moments so quiet, so subtle, that if you aren't paying attention, you could miss them altogether. Story comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. It started with a sound, a faint little whimper, hardly noticeable, lost in the wind, hidden beneath the snow, a sound that most people might not have even noticed, a noise that might have been the creaking of ice or the whisper of wind through frozen branches. But to the right ears, to the right heart, it was a cry for help. The rescuers were about to call it a day. The storm was closing in. The sun was setting behind the hills, tracing long shadows across the icy lake. They had been looking for hours, after a very general notice about a missing dog. No one knew where it had gone to. Nobody even knew if it was still alive. But then, a sound, a whimper, so faint it was nearly consumed by the wind. One of the rescuers froze. He narrowed his eyes and scanned the landscape. For an instant he thought he had hallucinated it. But there it was again, a soft, desperate plea. From there, they followed the sound, hearing the crunch of their feet in the snow. There was an air of tension, with urgency, and then they saw it. At first, it didn't seem real. Just a shadow under the ice, still silent, too far gone to save. But as they approached, their breath caught in their throats, because it wasn't simply a shadow below the ice. It was a dog. A lovely, white-furred dog, entombed under the ice. Its body was barely moving, its eyes half closed. It had been there too long, too cold, too weak, and yet it was still holding on. For a few seconds, time stood still. The rescuers sat stunned, hearts racing in their chests. They realized they didn't have a lot of time. The ice was thick. The water was below freezing. Every second counted. If they didn't act fast, this dog wouldn't make it. But they also knew one thing. They were not giving up. Not now, not ever. For if there's anything stronger than the cold, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, it's hope. That dog had nothing left but hope, because this dog was not ready to quit, and neither were they. They say that no capes are worn by heroes. At times they wear thick coats and frozen boots, with their breath visible in the freezing air, their hands shaking, not from fear, but from the stinging cold and the gravity of the moment. The led rescuer drops to one knee at the edge of the ice. His gaze pins down the dog underwater. His heart races in his chest, each thud echoing the growing uncertainty in their ranks, time running out. The ice is thick, too thick to break with their bare hands. They need tools, they need a plan, and most of all, they need to move fast. "Give me the shovel," the voice rings out above the freezing wind. Another rescuer scrambles to get it across, his gloved hands awkward from the cold. The lead rescuer clutches it tightly, his knuckles white. He knows they have just minutes. The ice beneath them creaks ominously, threatening to crack at any moment. But there is no time to dither, no time for second-guessing. So there is only one way: break the ice at all costs. The first hit is deafening. The metal lip of the shovel beats down against the ice, creating cracks that spider out across the surface. The dog doesn't move. Its body lies motionless, its eyes flickering weakly. But the rescuers won't look away. They will not be ruled by fear. The second hit comes harder, then a third, then a fourth. With every blow, ice is sent sailing into the air, the cracks becoming wider, deeper. The rescuers don't speak. They don't need to. Their faces are a portrait of their determination, clear, unbreakable. Because this isn't a dog trapped under the ice. This is a life, a fragile, precious life. And so long as there is even a tiny glimmer of hope, they will battle for it with everything they've got. The ice creaks again, only louder this time. A piece falls off, plopping into the frigid water below. The dog's body floats, slightly displaced by the current under the surface. For a fraction of a second, the rescuers freeze, breath catching in their throats. The water is cold, deadly so, and just a few seconds immersed could be lethal. If they don't get the dog out soon, it won't survive. Keep going. The voice of the lead rescuer is sharp and urgent. He swings the shovel again, more forcefully this time. More ice breaks away. The hole is getting bigger, closer, almost there. Another hit, another crack. The water underneath the ice shakes violently, and then the ice gives way. The hole is open now, dark water swirling underneath. The dog's body swims just beneath the surface, so near yet so far. One of the rescuers grabs a rope and loops it around his arm, while another steadies him from behind. There's no time to think, no time to hesitate, only time to act. The lead rescuer lays flat on his stomach, sliding toward the edge of the ice. His hand plunges into the cold water. The cold is agonizing. It cuts through his skin like a flame, but he doesn't care. He extends his fingers, brushing the dog's fur. Almost. Got it. His hand wraps about the dog's collar. He clutches it firmly, his heart racing in his chest. Pull! The others spring into action, pulling him back as he drags the dog up to the surface. The water battles them, drawing the dog down, not releasing it. But the rescuers just won't quit. They haul harder, breath torn in ragged gasps. And finally, with one last desperate tug, the dog breaks free. The dog falls onto the ice, soaked with water, trembling head to paw. Its eyes just barely open, its breathing shallow. But it's alive. Somehow, against all odds, it's alive. The rescuers make no time. They tangle the dog in a thick blanket, fast-moving hands efficiently. They know the battle isn't finished. The dog remains perilously cold, its body on the brink of collapse. They need to get it warm. They need to get it safe. And they need to do it now. Miracles happen when you least expect them. That yet, life offers you a second chance, but only if you're willing to fight for it. The dog's eyes flutter open for a moment. They're glassy, unfocused, but they still hold on, still fighting. Its body is drenched, its fur ratty with ice. Its every breath is a battle, every step a reminder of how it nearly lost everything. But not yet, not now, because this story is not over yet. And if the rescuers have something to say about it, it never will be. Stay with us, buddy. The voice of the lead rescuer is calm but urgent. His eyes dart between the road and the dog. He understands how precarious the situation is, how quickly things can turn. But his voice doesn't waver, because the dog requires him to be strong, even when he's terrified. As they go around a bend, the tires skid on the ice and the truck swerves slightly. Everything hangs in the balance for a split second. But the driver remains on course, white-knuckling the wheel. There's no time for mistakes, no time for fear, only time to push forward. When we get to the vet, we're almost there. Another rescuer marvels from the back seat, his gaze fixed on the dog. He's clinging to the blankets, trying to keep the heat from leaving, holding the dog's body from sliding deeper into the cold. But it's not enough. The dog's breathing slows. Its body goes limp. And for one terrifying moment, it feels like they've lost. Number not yet. The voice of the lead rescuer slices through the panic. His hands clamp down on the wheel. His eyes narrow. He becomes determined. We didn't come this far just to quit now. Light finally appears in the distance, and then the hospital comes into view. A place of safety, a place of hope. The rescuers do not lose a moment. The truck skids to a halt, the doors bursting open. They move quickly, their breath visible in the frozen air. The dog is cradled with care, its body nearly weightless in their hands. What happened? Dog found trapped in ice. Hypothermia, severe. Breathing is weak. Get him on the table. We need warm fluids. Now. The room erupts into staged pandemonium. Machines beep steadily. A blanket warmer hums in one corner. Somehow, a golden, gentle light illuminates the dog's fragile body as the veterinarians execute their work quietly and quickly, with intense eyes and steady hands. It's a race against time. One of those delicate balances between life and loss. But they're not giving up. Not now, not ever. The lead rescuer is at the edge of the room, breath strangled in his chest. His eyes never leave the dog. He knows he should step back. He knows he needs to let the veterans do their job. But he can't. Not after everything. Not when they've come so far. Minutes pass like hours. The world outside fades away. There's only this room, only this moment. Just this thin life dangling on a time. And then, a sound, software barely audible but unmistakable. A breath, then another. The dog's abdomen expands and contracts, slowly but surely. Its eyes snap open once more for an instant, but this time around they are more distinct. This time they are stronger. This time, there is hope. He's not out of the woods yet, she says, her voice steady but admonitory. But if we can just keep him warm, keep him steady in his heart, he might just have a chance. The lead rescuer exhales, shoulders finally relaxing after hours. It's not over, but for the first time since they discovered the dog under the ice, it feels as if they're winning. It feels like they've given him something he hasn't had in some time. A chance. Sometimes, a miracle is not just one moment. Sometimes, it's a succession of choices, each drawing you that much closer to the light. They say the hardest battles are fought in silence, not in moments of noise and chaos, but in the long, quiet hours when time feels frozen, when every breath could be the last, when the line between hope and heartbreak is razor thin. The lead rescuer stands by the window, his eyes fixed on the dog. His breath fogs the glass, but he doesn't notice. His mind is racing, replaying every moment of the rescue, every choice they made. Could they have moved faster? Could they have done something differently? Should they have found him sooner? Guilt is a heavy thing. It wraps around you like the cold, sinks into your bones, whispers that it's your fault even when it isn't. But the dog is still breathing, and as long as that remains true, there is still a chance. There is still hope. His body temperature is rising, the vet says, her voice quiet but steady. Her eyes are tired, but there's a flicker of optimism in them. He's responding to the fluids. That's a good sign. The rescuers exchange glances, relief washing over them in waves. It's a small victory, but it's a victory. And in moments like this, small victories mean everything. The dog stirs slightly beneath the blankets, his paws twitching. His breath hitches, then evens out again. It's the first real movement they've seen. A fragile reminder that somewhere deep inside, he's still fighting. The lead rescuer takes a step closer, his footsteps soft against the tiled floor. He crouches beside the table, his eyes level with the dog's. "Hey, buddy," he whispers. His voice is warm, steady. "You're not done yet, not even close." The dog's ear twitches at the sound of his voice. It's a tiny movement, so small it would be easy to miss. But the lead rescuer notices. Of course, he does. Because he's been waiting for something, anything, to tell him that the dog is still in there, still holding on. And this is everything. The vet adjusts the blanket, tucking it gently around the dog's body. "We'll monitor him through the night," she says. His chances are improving, but he's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours are critical. The words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Everyone in the room understands what she isn't saying. That hope is a fragile thing, that life can shift in an instant. But no one speaks it out loud. Because right now, they need hope more than anything else. The rescuers settle into the waiting room, their bodies tired but their hearts refusing to rest. The hours drag on, each one longer than the last. Outside, the snow falls steadily, blanketing the world in white. Inside, time feels suspended. Each breath the dog takes is a small triumph. Each beep of the monitor is a reminder that he's still fighting. Sometime after midnight, the lead rescuer dozes off in a chair, his head resting against the wall. His dreams are filled with flashes of ice, of rushing water, of the dog's lifeless body being pulled from the lake. But then a sound, software barely audible, but enough to wake him. His eyes snap open, his heart racing. He stands quickly, making his way back to the examination room. The vet is already there, her eyes wide with surprise. "He's waking up," she says, a hint of awe in her voice. The dog's eyes flutter open, slowly, cautiously. For a moment they are unfocused, lost. But then they lock on the lead rescuer, and something shifts. Not big, not sudden, but real. The dog's body relaxes just slightly, his breath evening out. His eyes stay on the rescuer, steady and trusting in a way they haven't been before. It's as if he knows that he's safe, knows that he's not alone anymore, knows that for the first time in a long time, he is going to be okay. I never say recovery is a straight line. It's not one moment when everything shifts. It's a series of minor victories, each one constructed on the previous, each taking you a step closer to living. But it's never easy, and it's never fast. The rescuers are sitting nearby, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, but filled now with something else: hope. The lead rescuer leans forward onto his knees, staring intently at the dog. He knows this isn't over, knows the battle isn't over. But for the first time, they seem like they're on the right side of the battle. The dog stirs, moving just a bit under the blankets. It's a slow process, undetectable, but it's enough to send a wave of relief through the room, enough to remind them he's still around, still fighting, still alive. The vet moves closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Hey, big guy," she says, kneeling next to the bed. "You gave us quite a scare." Her hand lies lightly on his side, sensing the slow, steady rise and fall of his breath. "He's stronger than we thought," she says, watching the rescuers. "But we still have a long way to go." The lead rescuer nods, his jaw set in resolve. "We will do what it takes," he says, his steadiness returned. "We didn't make it this far to quit now." Time passes slowly. The hours blur into each other, one bringing fresh challenges, fresh questions. The dog drinks water for the first time. A few sips, but enough to demonstrate he's making an effort. He eats a bit, soft food given slowly in small quantities. Every step feels monumental. Every decision is kind of a leap of faith. But recovery is never linear. There are setbacks, moments when his body grows weak, when the struggle feels too much. Moments when rescuers hold their breath, waiting, hoping, praying for him to pull through. And he does, every time. Because this dog has lived through worse. And he's not going to stop now. The dog's eyes dart toward him, its ears jolting slightly. I don't know where you came from, or how you got out there on that lake, but you're not alone anymore. Not ever again. For a moment, the room goes quiet. The dog's gaze remains fixed on the rescuer, something unsaid hanging in the balance between them. A fragile understanding, a tentative trust. And then, the dog moves, slowly, carefully. His head leans against the rescuer's leg for just a moment. A whisper of contact. A silent thank you. The lead rescuer catches his breath in his chest. His hand rises of its own accord, softly finding a resting place on the dog's head. It's the first time he's touched him since the rescue. And this time, the dog doesn't flinch. He doesn't pull away. He just stays. It's said the hardest step is the first one. Not because it's physically hard, but because it's terrifying. Because all your instincts go against it and tell you to stand where it's safe, where it's familiar, where nothing can hurt you. But survival is not the same as living, and sometimes the only way to go forward is to take that first step, even when you're afraid. The lead rescuer kneels next to the dog, speaking quietly and calmly. "Oh, come on, buddy," he says, a kind smile crossing over his face. "You've got this. Just one step. That's all we need." His palm is open, not pushing, not demanding, just offering. The dog watches him for a long moment. His body feels tight, his mind spins. All his instincts tell him to stay down, to stay where it's safe. Because getting up means exposing himself. It means trusting that this man won't drop him. The rescuers hold their breath, gaze, wait. The air is thick with anticipation, like it's clinging to something too delicate to name. And then, the dog moves, slowly, carefully. His front paw keeps pushing on the floor, shaking under its own weight. His muscles ache, his legs shake. But he doesn't stop. He pushes more, his back legs following, lifting him into wobbly, uncertain posture. It isn't graceful, it isn't perfect. But it's enough. It's everything. The lead rescuer's grin broadens. "That's it. Good boy, you're doing it." His voice is strong and steady, encouraging, warm. The dog looks at him, eyes uncertain now, but no longer afraid. He takes another step, and then another, each with a little more confidence. The staff at the clinic watches in awe, their eyes softening with each step. They've witnessed recoveries before, but this one feels different, because this is not just about a dog walking again. This is the story of a dog that learned to trust again, to have faith in something greater than our mere existence. The dog stops for a moment to catch his breath. His legs still weak, his body still in recovery. But this time he isn't afraid to turn the page. This time, he doesn't want to evade reality. The lead rescuer kneels beside him, his hand lightly resting on the dog's back. "Oh, you've come a long way, buddy," he says tenderly. "And now you're going a step further." The dog leans into the touch, blinking his eyes closed for a moment. It's a small gesture, nearly imperceptible, but it says more than words ever could. It says, "I'm trying." It says, "I'm not giving up." It says, "I trust you." The outside world is where life begins, they say, but for some, it's where life used to shatter, and stepping back into it. That requires a bravery most people will never comprehend. The lead rescuer crouches next to the dog, his voice calm and low. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now." His hand is loose and light on the dog's back, no pressure, no demand, just reassuring. The dog inhales, his nose quivering with cold air filling his lungs. The snow beneath him shines in the morning light, soft and undisturbed. It's beautiful, but it's also overwhelming, because liberty is not always a walk in the park. He steps tentatively forward and his paw breaks through the snow. The cold nips at his pads, a shock to his body. He comes to a stop, breath-snatching. It is not like the soft warmth of blankets in the clinic. This is raw, real, unpredictable. And part of him wants to go back inside. But then, the primary rescuer drops to one knee at his side, eyes steady, calming intensity. "You know you can do this," he says quietly, "just one step at a time." The dog hesitates. His body quakes with the tension between instinct and trust. But there is something in the rescuer's voice that anchors him. Something steady, something real. And so he takes another step, then another. The cold remains, but it now feels gentler, less threatening, because this time he's not alone. The world spreads before him, infinite and new, snow-covered fields. If you still have it in your toolbox, just go ahead and take it. The sound of birds chirping faintly in the distance. It all feels so far from the frozen lake where his story nearly ended. So unlike the fear that had once dominated his life. He walks slowly, unsure but deliberate in his steps. Every step sounds almost like a proclamation, a silent act of defiance against all that sought to defeat him, a pledge to himself that he will continue to push ahead. The lead rescuer stays close behind, providing space but staying in view. He understands just how fragile this moment is, how easy it would be for the dog to sink back into fear. But he understands that fear is not the most powerful thing in the world either. Hope is. The dog stops next to a little tree, his nose quivering as he sniffs the bark. His breath puffs into the cold air, swirling about him like a gentle halo. For the first time, he isn't merely surviving, he's exploring. The rescuers stand at a distance, silent smiles on their faces as they beam with pride. They understand this moment will be lost on the vast majority. Just a dog wandering in the snow. But for them, it's a victory, a miracle. Because this is more than just a walk. This is a return to life. They say you measure life in moments, in little, brief, inconsiderable seconds, until you check back. And sometimes the most mundane moments, like a dog stepping tentatively into the snow, look like the ones that change everything. Trust, according to them, is something that is built in inches of moments, not in big gestures or bold declarations, but in a calm, regular repetition, by showing up over and over again until there's no more question to ask, until trust is something we cannot choose, but a fact. With each passing minute, the dog's steps become more assured. His head raises just a little, his nose working overtime to smell all that surrounds him. It's overwhelming, the scent of fresh snow, of pine trees, of distant birds, and life beyond the clinic walls. But it doesn't, for the first time, feel too much. For the first time, it feels possible. The lead rescuer knelt in the snow, his tone unflappable. "You're doing very well, buddy," he says, extending his hand. No treats, no commands, just an invitation, a choice. The dog pauses, his gaze moving from the rescuer's face to his hand. It's a moment that you feel in your bones, a moment when everything could be different, and then he takes a step forward, slowly, carefully. He nudges the rescuer's fingers with his nose, soft and tentative. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. The rescuers gasp and their hearts swell when they see it. it appeals to bigger themes. This isn't just a dog being taught to trust a human. This is a spirit finding its footing in the world. A soul that nearly drowned under the ice, returning to the light. The dog leans in a little bit more, his breath warm against the rescuer's hand. The world comes to a standstill for a second. No wind, no sound, simply a connection that doesn't take any words. A connection that says, "I see you, I trust you, thank you." The lead rescuer smiles, petting the dog softly on the head. "You're going to be just fine," he mutters. And this time, for the first time, the dog believes him. Not because what the words say is comforting, but because they are true. Inside the clinic, the warmth wraps around them like a gentle hug. The dog walks to his bed, stopping briefly before curling into the soft blankets. His eyes stay open, watching as the lead rescuer takes a seat next to him. Neither one of them moves for a long moment. The only sounds are the gentle hum of the heater, the quiet rhythm of life coming back to normal. They don't need to speak. They've already said all that needs to be said. In every step, in every touch, in every decision to remain rather than flee. This is not the end of their journey, not even close, but it's a turning point, a moment they'll remember together, not for being big or loud or plot-driven, but because it was real. They say joy is found in the smallest moments, in a gentle breeze, in the warmth of sunlight, in the stillness of someone who never lost faith in you. But for those who have lived in fear for so long, joy does not come naturally. It has to be discovered. It has to be earned. The lead rescuer exits, the air crisp and fresh. "Get up, buddy," he says, patting his leg encouragingly. "You've got something to show us." The timbre of his voice is light, teasing, but the dog feels something lurking beneath, something warm, something safe. The dog pauses at the door, his paws slightly raised, just above the threshold. The world is still new to him, still full of unknowns, but today something feels less scary, less heavy, and, taking a deep breath, he leaves. Fresh powder covers the yard like the cosmos, a glittering sea filled with indents of their paws. It sprawls outward, wide and inviting. The dog, in the middle, sniffing the air, takes it all in. Sounds he hasn't heard in a long time fill the air. The gentle rustle of trees, a faint chirp of a bird, a soft buzz of a universe that doesn't seem so menacing anymore. And then, a sound. Soft first, but climbing up. A snowball rolls across the snow to land a few feet away. The dog freezes, staring at it, focused. It's a bright red, its surface glimmering in the sun. The lead rescuer chuckles quietly. "It's just a ball, buddy," he says, bending down. "You've never seen one before. Just never." He lifts it up, playing with it gently between his palms. For an instant, the dog eyes him warily, his brain wrestling with what this implies. And then, the rescuer gently tosses the ball a few feet, having it bounce once, twice, until stopping in the snow. The dog's ears perk up. He is suture-tensed, muscular, spring wound set to strike. Not out of fear this time, but out of curiosity. He takes a tentative step toward the ball, his breath steaming in the frigid air. He pokes his paw into the snow, making small prints, and then another step, and another, until he is standing right in front of it. The ball rolls a bit as his nose grazes it. He recoils, startled at first, but it has something about it, and he pauses. There's something about it that feels fun. He gives it another nudge, harder now. It rolls atop the snow and leaves a trail behind. The dog cocks his head, his eyes shining with something life-affirming. something he hasn't felt for years. Playfulness. "Ho, ho," cackles the lead rescuer down the line. "There you go. That's it." His heart swells at the sight. The dog had once lacked the strength even to stand. Now, in the snow after a ball, his body light and free. With each step, the dog's movements become more assured. He runs after the ball, his paws kicking sprays of snow up. He pants in rapid bursts, and his eyes are bright with excitement. And then, for the first time since they were rescued, his tail wags. At first, it is a slight movement, barely noticeable. But it builds quicker until it's a full, joyous wag. The kind of wag that says, "I'm alive, I'm happy, I'm free." The lead rescuer swallows a lump in his throat. He always knew this moment would come, eventually. But seeing it, the dog, seeing himself as truly happy for the first time, it's more powerful than he ever dreamed. The dog pauses briefly, breath coming in soft pants and making little clouds in the brisk air. He glances back at the lead rescuer, his eyes glimmering with something else. Something pure. Something joyful. And for the first time, he isn't just trusting. He's thriving. They say home is more than a place. It's not walls or doors or a ceiling over your head. It's the sense of belonging, of knowing you're safe, of knowing you're loved. The dog gazes up at the lead rescuer, his eyes steady and calm. There's no fear in them now, no hesitation, only trust, pure and unshakable. The main rescuer squats, his hand extended. "Come here, buddy," he tells the kid gently. His voice is warm, familiar. The dog walks toward him without hesitation, covering the distance between them in a few strides. And when the man's hand comes to rest on his head, the dog leans into it completely. Not cautiously, not tentatively, but completely. It's a small moment, but it's also monumental, because for a dog who lost everything but fear and loneliness, this is everything. This is home. The other rescuers begin to huddle around, their smiles soft and proud. They've been with her every step of this journey, from the icy waters to this sunlit yard. They've watched the moments of struggle, the setbacks, the little victories that amounted to something more than they imagined possible. And now, here, watching the dog wag his tail and the attach in the shoulders as he leans into the lead rescuer's touch, they know they've seen something remarkable. "You're part of the family now," the lead rescuer laughs. "No more cold nights, no more fighting to survive. Those days are over." The dog tilts his head a little, his dark eyes filled with what looks almost like human intelligence. It's like he understands every single word, like he knows this promise, this unspoken vow, remains one that's never going to be broken. Everything in the world feels softer now, warmer. The dog starts to sniff the yard again, his steps lighter, his movements more playful. He runs after the ball, flipping it in the air with his nose, tail wagging vigorously. For a moment, he is just a dog. Not a survivor, not a miracle. Just a dog learning the simple pleasure of being alive. The lead rescuer is perched on a nearby bench, watching the dog closely. A lump rises in his throat, a swell of emotion he didn't anticipate, because he knows how close they were to losing this dog. He recalls the ice-cold water, the desperate rescue, the long nights of uncertainty, but now those memories feel far away. What matters is this moment. What counts is the existence before him, full of light and potential. The dog hesitates, breathing in muffled pants. He spins back toward the lead rescuer, his eyes finding his once more. And in that moment, they have an unspoken connection, a quiet promise, a bond that can't be broken. They say family are the people who choose you, not out of obligation, not because they have to, but because they see you, all your cracks, all of your shadows, and they choose you anyway. The dog's ears perk up at the sound of approaching footsteps. He twists his head a bit, his eyes meeting the lead rescuer's. His gaze no longer hesitates. No fear, just recognition, trust, and something deeper, something different, something close to love. The lead rescuer crouches at his side, speaking softly. "Hey, buddy, thinking about the old days?" The dog cocks his head and listens, rapt. "I know. It's been a long road, hasn't it?" His hand gently sits on the dog's back, his fingers sinking into the thick fur. "But you're here now, and you're here to stay." The dog leans into the touch, leaning his body against the man's side. It's the kind of act that feels natural now, natural, like he's been a part of this world, this life all along, like he has finally found his place. They sit together in companionable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the trees. Things feel quiet, are cloaked in the gentle geisha gown of dusk. It's a moment that doesn't require words, a moment full of the kind of peace neither ever thought they would know. A door to the clinic opens, and one of the other rescuers comes out with a small bowl of food. "Dinner time," she says, smiling as she places the bowl on the ground. The dog perks its ears up and sniffs the air excitedly. His body takes on a newfound lightness, his tail waving gently above the bowl as he approaches. He eats at a slow pace initially, savoring every bite, not because it might be taken away, no, but because he finally knows that there will always be more. That hunger is a thing of his past, that he is no longer waiting for the next disaster to strike. The lead rescuer looks at him and smiles. It's such a simple thing, eating dinner, wagging his tail, but it feels monumental, because every little gesture, every small moment, is evidence that the dog is no longer just surviving. He's living. Later that night, the dog lies curled on the floor of his clinic bed. All is silent except the gentle hum of the heater. His eyelids grow heavy, body relaxed and warm. It is the kind of sleep that is easy now and free from those demons that once plagued him. The lead rescuer sits close by, observing him slip away. His thoughts return to the cold waters, the frantic rescue, the long nights of waiting and hoping. He recalls how the dog had quaked, the way his body had been so quiet, so cold. Now it seems like a different lifetime, like it was something that happened to someone else. And yet, the memory lingers, not as a wound, but as a reminder that miracles don't just happen instantaneously. They occur in small, incremental steps, in choices repeated time and time again, in quiet moments where self-love is greater than fear. The dog springs a little, his eyes cracking open for an instant. He turns his eyes into the lead rescuer's, soft and steady, and, without a noise, closes his eyes again, his body slipping further into sleep. He is not afraid. Not anymore. They say there's promise to mornings, a chance to begin again, a new chance to let go of the past and step into what could be. For many, mornings are the start of another day. But for him, each morning is a gift. The dog stands slowly, his body not quaking with weakness. His walks are purposeful, tail wagging gently behind him. The lead rescuer squats down, reaching out his hand. "Good morning, buddy," he says, chuckling. "Are you ready for today's adventure?" Without hesitation, the dog pads over, his nose grazing the rescuer's hand. It's a small gesture, one that has become instinctive at this point. A way of saying, "I'm here, I'm ready, I trust you." Today, they're going somewhere special. This is the dog's first venture outside the clinic. Not for survival, not for rescue, but for the sheer delight of living. The trees go by in a trail, their leaves whispering to the wind. Fields extend endlessly on both sides, speckling them with wildflowers and little pops of color. The air is fragrant with grass and fresh earth, so unlike the cold, sterile scent of survival. It smells like freedom. It smells like life. The truck brakes to a standstill beside a big, empty field framed by a lazy stream. The lead rescuer opens the door and gestures to the open space. "Well, here we are," he says, smiling. "All yours." The dog emerges, his pads sinking into the supple grass. He sniffs the air, his nose twitching. Before him, the world opens, wild and sprawling. He steps forward, tentatively, another step, and then he runs. His body now moves with an elegance and strength that once would have seemed impossible. His legs elongate, feet grazing the ground as the dog leaps over the field. The wind rushes around him, tousling his fur, bringing with it a sensation he scarcely recognizes yet. Immediately loves, pure, unfiltered joy. The lead rescuer stands back and watches, taking pride. This isn't simply a dog running. This is a dog that once was on the brink of death, now alive and thriving. This is a dog who knew nothing but fear and loneliness, now running after butterflies in the sun. This is a dog who has finally found his way home. The dog slows in the shade of the stream, tongue out, panting happily. He dips his nose into the water, drinking deeply and then stepping back, drops clinging to his whiskers. For a moment, he simply stands there, his face rippling on the surface. His eyes are glimmering, his body strong. He no longer resembles a dog who had recently just held on to life. He looks like a dog who was supposed to live. His lead rescuer approaches, kneeling next to him. The dog nudges his head into the man's shoulder, his body leaning for warmth from the touch. "Look at you," the rescuer says softly, awe in his voice. "You're not just making it through anymore. You're living." The dog draws back slightly, his eyes meeting the rescuer's. At that moment, words aren't necessary. There's no need for promises or reassurances, because all that needs to be said is written there in the quiet connection between them. I'm here. I'm safe. I'm free. But they say every ending is a start of something new, that often the most beautiful stories are birthed from the grimiest beginnings, when the world feels heavy, when hope feels distant. But if you're lucky enough, if you can bear to hang on, you never know. You just may be at the beginning of something great. The dog wanders through the yard with new confidence. His steps are light, near playfulness in his gait, his tail wagging gently behind him. He stops at a patch of wildflowers, with his nose twitching as he inhales. It's a small moment, ordinary to most, but for him it feels monumental, for this is what it means to live. But to live, not just survive. The lead rescuer stands on the porch with crossed arms, a slight smile on his face. He's witnessed this dog at his lowest. He's watched him fight for every breath, for every step. And now, to see him moving with so much freedom, so much joy, it feels like a miracle. The door of the clinic opens, and another rescuer climbs out, a leash in her hand. "Are you ready to make some new friends?" she says, her voice airy and playful. The dog's ears swivel forward as perking up at the sound. Friends? He doesn't know what that means, though, but he's ready to find out. The dog hitches for a second. Over his aged mind dance memories of other dogs, memories of tension, of fear, of survival. But this feels different. This feels safe. The lead rescuer kneels beside him, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "They're just like you," he murmurs. "They've had a lot of ups and downs, but they made it through. Just like you did." The dog steps a little closer, his gaze wary but curious. One of the other dogs pauses mid-run to sniff the air. There's a pause, reading each other, a moment of understanding. And then, the other dog lets out a single bark, its tail wagging furiously. An invitation, a promise of friendship. The dog cocks his head, pondering the offer, and then he takes a step forward out of sheer audacity. The other dogs leap toward him, and their energy is contagious. They circle around him, playful, bumping him with their noses, telling him to come on, let's play. At first, he's unsure. His body tightens. It is an old instinct, and he cannot help himself. But then, something shifts. Something softens. Because this isn't the past. This isn't survival. This is something new. This is joy. He hits the pavement in a run, his legs long beneath him, his breath short bursts. The first rescuer laughs, crouching to greet him. "You're getting the hang of this," he says, tufting the dog's fur. "You're not just surviving, are you anymore, son? You're living." The dog drops the ball at his feet, eyes glimmering with a mute challenge. Again. The rescuer springs to his feet, launching the ball further this time. And the game continues, a dance of trust and joy, of movement and connection, of life lived in the here and now, absent fear. As the sun sinks lower in the sky, flooding the world with soft shades of gold and pink, the dog finally slows, his breath coming out in soft pants. He walks back to the porch, where he curls up at the rescuer's feet. His body is warm, his heart is full, and for the first time ever, he feels complete. The lead rescuer sits next to him, his hand on the dog's back. He scans the horizon, his thoughts returning to that frozen lake, to when they pulled him from beneath the ice. It feels like a lifetime ago, a different world, a different dog. "You've gone so far," he whispers. "I knew you could do it all along." The dog tilts his head slightly, his eyes meeting the rescuer's. His gaze holds something deep and unarticulated. Gratitude, love, home. After all, they say, all good journeys come to an end. But sometimes the end is not an end at all. It's a beginning, a place where all broken things endure and heal, where trust takes the place of fear, a place called home. The lead rescuer pets the dog's fur gently. "You're safe now," he tells her, "and you always will be." The dog's eyes droop shut, breath steady, his body settling further into comfort and warmth. He is home. And for the first time in his life, he knows it. The life you save sometimes ends up saving you back.